Good morning, good evening. Thanks for everyone for joining today's discussion around AI regulations in healthcare, pharma, and biotech. My name is Dave Trier. I'm the VP of Product. And specifically, we're going to cover three areas in today's webinar. First, we're going to talk about a couple of examples where regulatory authorities have already stepped in around the use of AI. Second, we're going to distill some of the key themes that these AI regulations have been talking about so that you can think about how do I arrange my overall programs, how to design them and prepare myself to safeguard the organization from the use of AI. And then third, we'll talk about a couple of practical steps to get started to prepare your healthcare organization. All right, so let's take a look at the first example. This one comes from the Department of Justice, where they are actually investigating the use of AI for connecting patient records with the recommended treatments. And this actually stems from a 2020 case with Purdue Pharma, where they were fined $8.3 billion for collusion, where they were introducing pop-ups to physicians to recommend their painkillers. Now, in 2020, this use of pop-ups is something that could be controlled. It's actually designed as part of the software. So something that, again, was not the best approach that they took, but is something that could have been controlled. You fast forward to today with the use of AI, where AI is actually being used to rewrite code, potentially produce different alerts based on different patterns, something that is not exactly deterministic. So this is where the Department of Justice has become really concerned about making sure that any AI that's used to match patients with particular drugs and devices is actually adhering to the appropriate anti-kickback laws and regulations overall. Just the first example where there's not a specific law in place, but a regulatory authority, in this case, the Department of Justice, has already engaged with several pharmaceuticals to ensure the proper use of AI. The second example is actually coming from the FTC. The FTC actually banned the use of AI technology for facial recognition at Rite Aid, and this for 5 years. And this actually stemmed from their improper usage of AI technologies, which was causing partiality or bias amongst their customers as it relates to that particular AI system for facial recognition. And what's particularly interesting about this is that we haven't seen any real laws in place from the FTC, but they actually stepped in, right, with Rite Aid and said, you can no longer use AI facial recognition technology for 5 years because you did not have the proper upfront testing, the robust verification of that testing to ensure that there were no partiality in the use of that AI technology. So again, a second example of where that regulatory authority was stepping in and actually causing a particular organization to forego the use of AI in this case. The third example comes from CMS. And this one actually was a memo that was put out recently where they stated that AI could not be used to provide overall denial of claims. In general, AI could be used to ensure that the right coverage was being applied, but any AI cannot be used to determine coverage or deny care to any members of any particular plans. And this was rooted in some lawsuits against United and United Healthcare and Humana, where the claims were that there were flawed AI caused denials of care for elderly patients and consumers overall. So a third example where there is a particular regulatory authority, in this case CMS, that's actually providing specific guidance around how you use AI, in this case, in the healthcare payer industry. So those were just a couple of examples. But if you look at all of the various AI guidelines or regulations, both in draft form as well as those that are published, it's confusing, right? There's so many of them. On the left-hand side, you can see several publications from the FDA, ones that are particularly around how to do AI/ML-based software as a medical device, or SAMD. Down the center, there are state level regulations. Within California, the Attorney General issued a publication requesting all AI systems used by healthcare providers be cataloged and sent back to the Attorney General. Similar type of notion within Texas with House Bill 2060. So you have the state level regulations. And then you have the US federal ones that are being published. Biden's executive order 14110, which talked about the fair and trustworthy use of AI. NIST published the AI RMF, the risk management framework, which really has been the foundational roots for many of the other publications, including those put out by Biden's executive order. At the global level, you have countries such as Singapore that has moved forward with their Veritas initiative. The World Health Organization recently published their ethics and governance of artificial intelligence for health. So you have all of these various publications or guidelines of varied form factors that are being produced as it relates to the proper use of AI. So how do you make sense of these? How do we ensure that our organization that can absolutely benefit from AI is doing so in a way that is properly being used by the organization, but also it is adhering to this myriad of different AI regulations? So that's where we're going to spend a couple of minutes here about distilling a few of the key themes that are apparent across all of these regulations. The first theme is having the proper visibility, accountability, and transparency. We're going to look at each one of those separately. First is visibility. This is where it all starts. In order to ensure that you are properly governing an AI system, all the regulatory guidelines state that you must know where all AI is being used across all the different systems and tools and software throughout the entire organization. The extract you see here is from Texas House Bill 2060, where it states that any agency, where agency could be any provider or other agency that's being funded by the state, must have an inventory report of all AI or automated decisions that are being developed, employed, or procured. These could be internally developed AI systems. They could be ones that are bought or vendor-based models, but regardless, they need to know every single system that has AI as part of it, as part of the overall visibility into the usage of AI. And the key takeaway here is pretty straightforward, is that you need to maintain a systematic inventory of all AI systems. And in particular, ensuring that you know a key field such as what's the name of it, what's the description, but more importantly is what's the purpose and the usage of that particular AI system, so that you know that this particular AI system was used to identify potentially fraudulent claims, right? So it all starts with having understanding or visibility into where AI is used. Next comes accountability. All the guidelines state that, yep, first thing you need to know about it. And then second, we need to know who is accountable for the usage of these AI systems. If you look in the top left, that extract is from the Office of the California Attorney General, where they specifically ask for the names, the exact names and contact information of the persons that are responsible for evaluating and owning the usage of these tools. And the bottom right-hand side is actually one very particular point around AI in regards to LLMs or other foundational models. A lot of organizations that I talk to think that, oh, well, you know what, these foundational model companies, whether it's an OpenAI or other, they'll take care of the governance for us, right? They've done all of their analysis. They made sure it's not going to produce bad results or biased results. So I'm good. I don't need to think about it. Well, that's actually not what the World Healthcare Organization said in their Ethics and Governance for AI for Health recent publication. As you can see in this is section 6.3 of that publication, that the deployer, which is the healthcare organization, is responsible for avoiding or mitigating risks associated with the use of LLM. Not the LLM actual developer. It's that, yes, they have their own responsibilities, but the actual usage or application of that foundational model is the responsibility of the healthcare organization, or again, called deployer here. So the key takeaway is to ensure that all of the stakeholders across the organization, whether business, IT, legal, risk, and compliance, have been identified for each AI system, and that you have the auditability around the specific reviews that they did, as well as the approvals around this. And again, you cannot take for granted that the LLM provider has done this for you, because it's specifically your usage of that LLM is what they're looking for from an accountability perspective. Third is transparency. So transparency has a lot of different definitions that you've probably seen, varying definitions across the community. But in this particular context, what we're really talking about here is first is that a person is aware that an AI system is being used. This kind of follows the GDPR-based pathways of ensuring that each consumer knows that their particular data, but in this case, that their particular AI system is actually being used to make the decision. And then second, if a person's information has been used in building an AI model. This extract in the middle is actually an interesting one from the U.S. District Court in Eastern District of Pennsylvania, where they basically said, if any attorney or any party has used AI in the preparation of any complaint or motion, etc., that must be in writing and must be very clear to disclose that use of AI. So it's just an indication of where the regulations are going to make sure that there's transparency into the use of AI as part of the overall operations that you might be using for AI. So key takeaway, of course, is as you have your visibility with your inventory and your accountability, now you need to make sure that there's traceability to identify any AI systems that might interact with consumers or patients or customers, so that you can have the appropriate notices in place. And this is only going to get more complex as you have more and more AI-based use cases. So that's the first theme. You got to establish the visibility, the accountability, and transparency around all the AI systems that are being used across the organization. The second theme is around safety and security. Safety, in this particular case, I'm drawing from the NIST AI risk management framework. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the fundamental goal of AI regulations is to ensure that these AI systems aren't causing any harm to human life or healthcare in general, the environment, or property. In order to do that, you first need to make sure that you understand the full scope and usage of the AI system. Again, AI can be used for a variety of different usages, but you need to apply them to a particular use case or engagement with a patient or consumer. So as from a governance perspective, you need to ensure that you're capturing what information it uses, the output of the AI system, but most importantly, what are the potential implications of the AI system, especially if the AI system has an issue? I call it if an AI goes wrong. On the left-hand side, you see a screenshot from the NIST framework, which talks about the overall safety, how you need to ensure that there isn't any harm to people, harm to an organization, harm to an ecosystem. So these are great general guidelines to follow as you're evaluating the potential AI that could be used across the organization or within an AI system. On the bottom right-hand side is actually a extract from the FDA proposed regulatory framework for modifications to AI ML-based SAMD, a mouthful. But what I wanted to call out in this one is that there's recommendations around having a appropriate risk tiering to ensure the appropriate safety protocols are in place based on that risk tiering. On the left-hand side, you can see that they first evaluate it based on the healthcare situation or condition. Is it a critical situation with the patient, serious or non-serious? And then the top-hand side is looking at, well, what is it used for? Is this AI system used to treat or diagnose, to drive clinical management, or to inform clinical management? So based on this grid, you can assign a risk tiering. If it's a critical situation and you're using AI to treat or diagnose, that's a tier 4 based AI system, which includes a lot more scrutiny, should have a lot more testing and safety protocols in place. Whereas, say, the bottom right, the non-serious to inform clinical management, has a tier 1, which means that you probably don't need as many steps in place, as much scrutiny as you would, again, if you're using it to treat or diagnose. So this is just a good practice to ensure that you are having the appropriate risk tiering and ultimately steps in place to ensure the overall safety of that usage of AI is safe for patients as well as the population in general. Another example here is actually coming from the FDA around the marketing submission recommendations for a predetermined change control plan for AI ML device software functions. Again, a mouthful. But what I wanted to call out here is that, again, the FDA specifically has provided guidance around how we are ensuring that these systems are being developed, validated, and implemented with all of the appropriate safeguards in place so we ensure that the device remains safe and effective. So they've put this publication in place with recommendations around how you are constantly monitoring and the process to ensure that before you release any AI ML updates into your software devices into your devices, that you are actually following the appropriate protocol. Let's jump into security. So this theme is ensuring that all aspects of the AI are secure. And again, that can mean many different things, but I'm actually paraphrasing a couple of different bullet points from the NIST AI risk management framework here. First is that it's privacy enhanced, meaning that the organization must incorporate practices to safeguard the human identity, the PII, the PHI, and especially making sure that we are including it for anonymity and confidentiality. Second is resiliency. So as you can expect that these AI systems, which may be informing clinical decisioning, they need to be very resilient, meaning they can actually withstand adverse events, something that wasn't expected as you were in real life. It wasn't expected when you were doing your upfront testing. So you need to make sure that any of that, whether it be malicious activity like data poisoning, or it's something that just wasn't thought of ahead of time, that the system must be resilient to any of those types of situations. And third, the system must be secure. Of course, this is ensuring that you can be protected against and also recover from cybersecurity attacks. But overall, the key takeaway here is to ensure that you're working very closely with your security team at the very start to ensure that these principles are put into place: resiliency testing, data security, application security, and network security. Let's move on to the third theme. Here is where we categorize it into being valid and fair. And valid can mean a variety of different things, but ultimately, at the end of the day, is to ensure that the AI system is actually providing output that is meeting the original requirements of the AI system with accuracy and reliability. And in order to do this, you need robust testing, an ongoing monitoring framework put in place to ensure that you've tested every situation, including some of the unexpected or adverse type scenarios, and that you have a framework in place to make sure that the AI system continues to operate within the bounds of what is expected. What you're seeing in the screenshot down below is from the FDA's, again, proposed framework for AI-based SAMD overall, where they're calling out 3 specific areas that need to be evaluated for that upfront testing to validate the clinical association, the analytical validation, and then the clinical validation overall. So again, regulatory authorities like the FDA are really putting a very strong foot forward to ensure that any AI system is tested thoroughly ahead of time. This next one calls out to the NPJ Digital Medicine publication, which specifically talked about implementing a robust quality management system that's explicitly tailored to healthcare AI technologies. So this is the key takeaway, again, is to make sure that as you are exploring and even developing and implementing or piloting AI-based solution, that you have a very robust testing approach specifically for AI, upfront testing, which includes being able to baseline what you would expect, and then an ongoing monitoring system, which you would ensure that you're adhering to your requirements and your thresholds, but also are comparing it back to your baseline that you took as part of the upfront testing. This has to apply both to internally developed AI as well as to purchase software that may have AI embedded. Because again, back to that World Healthcare Organization publication is that the healthcare provider or payer or pharmaceutical, you are responsible for the usage of AI, even if it's purchase software that's being embedded. The last area is around fair. This is what the overall, a lot of the conversation has been around, is to ensure that there's ethical fairness across any AI system that's being used. This topic has been discussed a lot, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I actually pulled an extract from the Singapore Veritas document 1 around their AIDA, Artificial Intelligence and Data Analytics, which basically calls out 4 different potential or principles, if you will, around the proper and fair usage of AI. The key takeaway around this is to, of course, make sure you have policies in place, but also enforcement controls, meaning that you are actually ensuring that any AI system is tested ahead of time for partial results, any potential bias, inherent bias that may be in the data sets that were used for training for internally developed models, but also that you have tooling from a production perspective to ensure that any AI system is actually not producing any partial or biased results overall. So I walk through those themes pretty quickly, but overall, the goal is to ensure that you have the appropriate accountability, visibility, transparency, secure and safe, and ultimately that you have fair and valid results overall. Now, why is it important to move forward with an AI governance framework now? I've talked with a lot of customers, and they say, well, Dave, I get it. You have all these different publications and guidelines, and, we could probably wait a couple of years. No, you really can't. And the reason, as I talked about at the outset of this webinar, was the regulatory authorities are already stepping in and actually imposing either bans or fines today. Furthermore, these AI regulations actually have some severe implications for healthcare organizations, pharmaceuticals, etc. As I mentioned before, the FTC actually banned Rite Aid from the use of AI facial recognition for 5 years. In the EU, Clearview AI actually was hit with $20 million fines by the EU, 20 million euro fines, 3 times, for a total of 60 million euros. So again, these are not just recommendations, but they're actually guidelines and regulations that are actually being enforced. The second is that AI has enormous potential, but it has inherent risks. Risks to the organization internally, risks to consumers and patients, and risks to the broader ecosystem at large. So how do you make sure that you manage those risks accordingly? Well, that's where, again, appropriate AI governance capability comes into play. And then the third reason is that with generative AI, I have never seen a technology move so fast within a large organization, moving from an idea to actually being used by every facet of the organization, whether it's clinical care, whether it's back office, marketing, finance, everybody is using this. So it's the Wild West of AI because they're rapidly trying to use these generative AI capabilities. And if you don't implement an AI governance capability immediately, you are actually exposing the organization to what I call AI governance debt, because you're going to try to be playing catch up to the 10, 20, 50 different generative AI and AI use cases that are being used across the organization. That AI governance debt is very costly from a risk perspective, but also costly from an operational expense perspective. So it's best to actually get started today with putting in the right AI governance framework. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Jay to wrap up overall. But again, thank you for your time. I hope you found this insightful around some of the early implications of the regulatory guidance that have been put out by various agencies, some key themes that you can talk about and start to implement within your organization, and then how to get started.
Thanks, Dave. We covered a lot in this webinar. We heard some stories about how AI regulations and oversight are already impacting organizations from a financial, brand, and regulatory perspective, including fines and a ban on using specific technology because of violations of rules or misuse of information or a lack of controls. And while the examples we gave were all in the healthcare, pharmaceutical, and biotech space, the reality is that these AI regulations are impacting all industries. And the time to prepare for them and get your handle on them and prepare for the right controls and adherence was yesterday. The next thing we covered were the common themes that are permeating the local, state, federal, and global regulations and rules and orders that are coming out. Those themes include visibility and accountability, safety and security, and valid and fairness. All these things are critical for every organization to understand and prepare for. And the final thing, we talked about the reasons why this is important to every organization. And the reasons are very simple. One, it introduces a lot of risk to organizations if you're not prepared. And the costs are high if one of these risks actually does impact your business, as we saw from these examples. And the longer it takes to prepare, the more debt around AI governance you're accumulating, which is going to be more costly over time. So the risk and the costs are just too high. So where does that leave you? Is your enterprise ready to navigate these AI risks and these regulatory changes as they continue to advance and evolve over time? It's a good question. But the answer is, it doesn't take a lot of effort or time to get started with AI governance. It's not a multi-year program. In fact, you can get started in as few as 90 days. And ModelOp can help you do that. So reach out to us at www.modelop.com or email us at sales@modelop.com to learn more. We'd love to talk with you about your AI initiatives and your needs and challenges and mitigating the risks and preparing for regulatory and oversight guidelines going forward. And if you want to see us in person, and you are in the healthcare space, we are going to be at the HIMSS conference in Orlando next week. We're going to be at booth 1892. We'd love for you to stop by and to meet you in person and talk more about your AI initiatives and AI governance. You can also schedule an appointment with us at this link if you want to have some dedicated time. We'd love to deep dive into your needs. So click on that link, make an appointment with us if you're going to be there. We'd love to spend time with you. And lastly, our next episode of the Good Decisions webinar is going to be on Wednesday, March 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic for later this March is going to be minimum viable governance, and that's going to be on the key must-have capabilities, the minimum pieces of functionality you're going to want to have in place to run your AI governance program to protect your business from the risks that AI introduces and to have the controls in place to prepare for the regulations and the themes that we talked about in today's webinar. So it's a don't miss webinar because it's going to help you get started quickly around AI governance and share the most important things that you're going to want to have in place. If you've already registered for the Good Decisions webinar series, good news, you're already enrolled for this next webinar and you'll get the reminder emails. But if you're not, please register here at the link on this slide and get registered for later this month. We'd love to have you there. We'd love for you to be part of the discussion, and we're looking forward to talking with you again soon. Thanks for joining today, and have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.